Hello and welcome to Worst Quality Crab, a podcast of Asian American recipes and stories from best quality hearts. I'm your host, Frisia Lee. With me, as always, is Sam.
Hello.
And joining us today is a very, very, very special guest to me, friend of the show, long time friend of mine, Crystal.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. For listeners at home, Crystal and I have known each other since we were freshmen in high school. I won't say how many years that is, but honestly, we're very old people, so it's a long time. And I'm very excited about this because conversations with Crystal are never boring, no matter what we're talking about. And I guess I just apologize in advance if we go a little bit off the rails. Get ready for potential high school nostalgia on our part, and apologies to Sam that he's going to have to listen to this as well.
Again.
Yeah. Oh, he's been hearing this for the last, I don't even know how many years.
Exactly.
All right. So Crystal, tell us about your childhood dish. Set the scene for us. What is it? Where were you eating it? Who was making it? All of the things.
The childhood dish is fun kun, and I think it just translates to like rice noodle roll, but it's actually a really big fat Chinese burrito that you eat on a plate with a spoon because it's saucy.
Why did you choose this?
My mom always asks me what I want to eat when I come home, and I think more oftentimes than not, it's this. Because these rice noodle sheets, I haven't been able to find them in New York, and I don't buy it, I don't make it. It's a hell of prep, so when I go home, I ask her to make it. But yeah, it would be a big thing because there's a lot of making process with it. So a fun part of the memories too is I got to partake in spreading out the noodle sheet, putting in the filling, and then trying to delicately roll it so it doesn't tear. And I am a maker of things. So I do think that I do enjoy foods where requires hand things like dumplings or wrapping. And that way I could participate in the cooking process, like when I was younger.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a bunch of chopping that happens beforehand because inside the roll is just a bunch of veggies. And then the only protein is ground meat. And then you just put it in a roux. So it becomes this very saucy gravy kind of filling, all wrapped up in one big sheet of rice noodle roll, which is similar to the, it's like an inch thick in a foie gras, right?
Yeah.
So imagine that rice noodle, but it's in just sheets. And then you have to buy it in a pack of 50 or whatever. And you have to unstick and unpeel them sheet by sheet, lay it down on a oiled cutting board. And then it's a make your own pizza, not really.
I mean, kind of. That sounds awesome.
It's not the typical rice roll from dim sum. If you wanted to, you can probably just fold it and chop it into fat noodles if you slice it in sections.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's purchased, growing up, I'd be like, where do you get this? And my mom would be like, the lady. The lady on Noriega. You go, and I was like, okay, what lady on Noriega? And she's like, well, I don't know. It's so-and-so's uncle's grandma, and she sells them, and you have to just drive up to their garage, and you call for an order the night before, and then you go pick it up. So sometimes the lady has the noodles.
Oh.
I think eventually they were sold at Sunset Super or something. I don't know.
That's wild.
Okay, and then wait, one important condiment is that it's always topped with just the Thai chili hot sauce.
Yes. Okay.
On top.
When we knew we were going to have you on the show, I told Sam ahead of time that we're definitely going to talk about Thai chili sauce because your house is the first place that I ever had it.
No way.
I might have had it at a restaurant before that, but definitely your house was the first house that I had it at that I was like, oh, you can just have this at home. And I have lived with a bottle of it in my home ever since. I mean, not in high school, but
told me that.
Yeah, as a grown up, once I had my own kitchen, I was like, this lives in my house now.
Yeah, it's a staple.
Yeah. And it was at your house, but I was like, oh, this is good. Put it on everything.
Put it on everything. Right.
I could see how that Thai chili sauce on this sounds amazing. And now I'm wondering if I have had it at your house.
The only reason I feel like you may have is because it's you have to cook hell of it. If we had it in the house, my mom would have definitely pushed it on you and been like, do you want to eat? Or whatever. By the time we were hanging out in high school, Frisia, we were probably just like, let's go to Mel's.
I mean, We
somewhere
did do
else.
that. No, but I definitely remember eating like a really skinny noodle at your house, almost like a My Fun or like a Singapore noodle, like
Mm-hmm.
that with chili sauce. And I was
Mm,
like, oh, yes, this is where
I
it's
see.
at.
Yeah, that's the sauce that we put on that as well.
Hmm.
We'd cook that just like chow mein style, but with skinny noodles.
Yeah. And I think that was also the first time where I was like, wait, these noodles exist outside of a restaurant also?
Really?
Yeah, because nobody in my house like cooked anything like that. Your house and you as a person was the first time I was like, Burmese Chinese? Please explain.
Oh, right,
Like
right,
I
right.
just didn't know, right? Like, we were 14 or whatever, and I was like, what is Burmese food? What do you mean Burmese Chinese? Like, I don't know what that means.
Yeah, that's actually something I was thinking about. If my friends were Chinese or other Asian friends, like I definitely think that there's a handful who first had Burmese food at my house for sure.
For sure.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And that's
Totally.
before the restaurants.
Yes, before the restaurants, which we
Yeah,
will get
yeah,
into later.
yeah.
Yeah, your house was definitely the first time that I had Burmese food in any way. And really, like, knowing you, I was like, the first time I was like, there's another way to be Chinese than just
Oh, word,
the
word.
Chinese that I know, which is like mostly through Hong Kong or
Oh, right,
second, third generation.
right.
Crystal, how does it feel to be the introducer of Burmese food for so many people you know?
I think it's cool. Ethnically, I am Chinese. And I believe I could say like culturally a very strong Burmese like cultural influence. And food is very apparent because like that's when you see like these like more like Southeast Asian flavors introduced into Chinese cooking or like that part of Chinese cooking. For example, I really love like the sour spicy
Mm.
versus just
Hmm.
like oyster sauce
Like a
situation.
salty umami.
Correct. And like my dad loves like a fish paste. And in those flavors, I think through the food, I was kind of like understanding that like I'm not actually like totally standard Chinese either through like my normal meals and things like that.
Were you aware of that when you were growing up?
Not really. I kind of treated it all as like one thing. So, for example, if I go to a Chinese friend's home, I would like ask about a certain food that I thought was totally Chinese, but I don't remember what it was. But it would be like, oh, we don't eat that. And I was like, oh, maybe it's the other part of
Mm.
my culture that, and then I started understanding it that way. Or it'd be like, oh, I'm at my Chinese friend's house and I said something like, where's the garbage can? But I said the word garbage can in Burmese. And they were like, what's that? And
Oh.
I was like, oh, it's a garbage can. Like, because I thought I was like connecting with the homie. I was like, hey, we're Asian.
Hmm.
Like, what I'm talking about. And then she was totally like, I don't know what you're talking about. And so I go home and I'm like, that was actually a Burmese word for trash can. So like, yeah, it was all like one culture, I guess, in my house. Like
Yeah.
the English and the Chinese and the Burmese we speak is all mixed together. I guess there's like I'd say like 15% Burmese in the Chinese.
Would you say the rice rolls were more Chinese or more Burmese or something your family invented?
I think it's definitely more Chinese. It's more like Chinese flavors. It's more like Chinese like ingredients, and maybe even in the rice noodle alone. It is something I had never seen on any menus. I wonder if my mom invented it because like I don't think I've ever known of any other Chinese friends to eat it. Because like every culture has like their version of a burrito, but like no one's ever really heard of. I mean, like Sam, have you had what I'm talking about?
Not exactly. My parents used to go to this restaurant and buy ha mai chung, which is like dried shrimp and scallions, and it would be like rolled up kind of tight.
In the rice roll.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It felt like a burrito, but I think I was like maybe 5 or 6 at the time when I would eat these. So they're
Right.
probably like not as big as I remembered it.
No, no, no. These are like Mexican burrito size.
Yeah, that's the closest thing.
Oh, so that's the one from like more like a dim sum style.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have yet to see where my mom got this, and I should ask her.
When she would make this for you, was this like a treat? Was it like like, were you excited about it? Was it a standout from some other foods or?
Yeah, I was excited for it because it's like the main star of the show, and then there's like some side dishes, usually a vegetable. But then there's so much veggies in the roll, so then I could just eat the roll, and I can have like 2 or 3 of them.
What kind of veggies were in the roll?
There's cabbage, and chives, and carrots. Oh, I have the list. Oh, and then there's this super, super firm seasoned tofu. That's like brown on the outside.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that one.
I love that.
That one's more from like Taiwanese cooking. You know that? It's like usually like a cold side dish with like celery. Oh, there's celery in it. And then any like ground meat. I guess she always used like pork or chicken, maybe. Maybe now turkey.
This sounds like all of the things that would have gone into the noodles that we talked about.
Yes.
But like, it almost sounds like she like made the stuff.
Oh my God, you're
and then
right.
Instead of putting it in the noodle, like mixing in the noodle, she was just like, oh, what if I just wrap it up in this?
Yo, I think you're right. Because it has the same flavor as just like a regular like chow mein.
Yeah, it's like Asian Taco Bell.
Right, like delivered in a different form, right. Maybe. So there's also this burrito joint up the block for me that we would also really love. Maybe she was like, I know, I'll do this, but
all the same ingredients, just stacked in a different order.
Yeah, I know, right? That's actually pretty funny. Because besides the Thai chili sauce on the top, I don't really think the flavor is any different. Besides it being a little more like, I don't know if I mentioned this. So the filling is eaten on a plate. So you don't eat it with your hand like a real burrito. It's like spoon or fork and knife because the filling is actually super saucy. There's like this like gravy roux, like the whole cornstarch mixture thing.
Yep.
So it's like tossed in with that at the very end. So there's this like super saucy. This is why I like latna, because it's like gravy noodle. It's like something about that like roux graviness with the
Sam
rice.
too.
Yeah.
Oh yes, love it.
Love it. Yeah.
Sorry, Petsy you for life.
Oh, I know you're team Petsy you.
This is really interesting because like in my head it's like, oh, it sounds like this, or like, oh, kind of like this thing I remember, but actually, the more you talk about it, the more unique it sounds.
Word.
Because of like, you just mentioned the gravy, and like the thing I was thinking about doesn't really have that much of a gravy in it. And then like eating it on a plate with like a fork and knife.
Right.
And it being like so big too, like it sounds very, very unique.
Yeah, it's like spilling out and then like scoop up the rest of the veggies with the sauce and the spoon.
I think you should ask your mom if she made this up.
I should, right?
Because it sounds like she did in the best way. I mean this in the best way possible.
I feel like I should ask her that. And then I'm going to ask her to make it for when I come home next. And y'all are going to come over and eat it.
Yes,
please.
Yes. Oh my God.
Oh my God. She would love nothing more.
I mean, honestly, this also sounds like something our kids would like.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I ate hella veggies that way.
This podcast is just a scam for us to get free home cooked meals.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It totally is.
1000%.
Because everyone has offered that to you.
Yep.
I mean, they have to.
Yeah. Going back to being like culturally Burmese, ethnically Chinese, and having like some sense of awareness of it growing up, what was that like? Like, did you feel like you would go out to Chinese food and it was, like a little bit foreign to you, or did you sort of like feel a little bit different from sort of what I call typical Chinese, which honestly is Sam?
I understood a little later because we didn't go to too many restaurants, I guess. But when we did, I definitely understood that we were going to go have Chinese food. The like index of Burmese cuisine is like not like huge. So like Chinese food, it's like fucking huge, right? It's like so many regions, so many different places. Okay, so the other thing too about the Burmese food is that it had a lot of ingredients that like my mom would not let me have. So I had eczema when I was younger, and there was like this like very hyper awareness of like, oh, she's allergic to this. Oh, she's allergic to these other things. And shellfish was a big thing in like seafood.
Oh yeah.
So like in a lot of the Burmese dishes, and because of, how I mentioned the fish paste, there's a lot of these like fish sauce type flavors that all stem from like seafood. And like, I think she was trying to like keep it, or she was being very careful about like what I ate. So then she'd alter the Burmese food, and like, I was like, don't strip away the flavor, because like that's where all the flavor is. That's where all the flavor is in like the smelly stuff. So then she'd like modify it, right? And then I'd eat less of it. So I do think that like maybe she would actually make me specifically more like a Chinese style food. Yeah, and then I think as I got older, you know, and my palate evolved, I would actually ask her for more Burmese food, like cooked the real way. I was like, don't mess with it, Mom. Like, give it to me how you guys eat it. Like, I wanna like have the first few bites and start like sweating like my dad, like, you know, from like all the spices and stuff. Yeah, yeah. So there's like some alterations and stuff that she did in that way. And so when we'd never go to a Burmese restaurant, because I think the only one that was there when I was still in San Francisco was Burma Superstar before the redo. And I think all the like Chinese Burmese folks like knew each other. So there was like some friendship with the owner. And I remember going there only like a couple times and then just eating like only the food my mom would allow me to eat. So like I didn't have the muhinga until like way later, for real, because it was a catfish based soup. I think she thought I was allergic to chickpea flour, like it made my throat itch or something. The chickpea flour is in the main like crispy thing that they crack over the noodles. So then I'd have it like without these things that kind of like make the dish, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I didn't really like fully have it until, yeah, I asked for it like later in life. And when my skin got better. So like now my allergies are more like tame.
How is it now as a full ass adult to be eating unmodified Burmese food?
I love it. I think I kind of liked that I wasn't totally just 100% Chinese. Like I knew it was special. I think I wasn't really afraid to talk about it or anything. But I think that's also a product of us growing up in such a large Asian community, you know, so I really embraced those weird nuances of being Chinese and Burmese, or like knowing that we spoke this weird mixture of 3 languages. I do think that like maybe when I first meet people, I say I'm Chinese because I am, right? But like they're like, oh, and then you get the, oh, but like, where are you really from? But when you get it from Asian people, you can tell them that your parents are from Burma. So only if Asians ask me, I give them the real skinny about like, oh yeah, like I am Chinese, but there's this other, you know, culturally, there's all this other Burmese stuff.
So your family was like Chinese people who like ended up in Burma?
Yeah. I actually only track it back to the grandparents' generation. They were first gen in Burma. And then I know for sure both of my parents were born in Burma within this like Toisan community in Rangoon. And then I guess that just lasted 1 gen, and then they came to America. So, and then when they left Burma, I don't think they were fleeing any of like the political stuff that's going on now. I think there was just an opportunity in the 70s and they took it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because when I think about you being Chinese, I actually don't think about you in sort of the way I maybe wrongfully categorize Chinese people.
Oh,
like,
word.
yes, you're Chinese, I know this, but like, I definitely think of you as being Burmese first.
Huh.
I mean, if someone were to ask me, I'd be like, oh, Crystal's Chinese, that's my Chinese friend. But when I think about you and sort of like what your life is like and how kind of like you are in the cultural sense of things, I definitely think of like the Burmese aspect. And I think a lot of that just stems from literally the food that I ate at your house.
You make a good point, because I know I was born in America, but when it's like if I ever think about my parents growing up, it's always set in like third world countries, Southeast Asia. It's never like mainland China. It's never Hong Kong. It's not like any of those. So in that sense, maybe that has really rubbed off, right? Because it's always like, in my day, back in Burma, like, so anytime they talk about themselves growing up and like their, you know, youth and anything like that is all Burma related. So I guess there's no other way to get around it, right? I'm not going to, I feel a little like I'm lying if I tell people I'm Burmese, but maybe I'm more relate to being Burmese than I do being Chinese sometimes.
I mean, it's like a complex question that we're not going to answer on this podcast, but right, it's the thing of like, how do you identify when you are ethnically something and culturally something else, and like
Right.
which one, not that anyone should have to just claim one of them, but like kind of where do you fit into that spectrum? What is like quote unquote real? None of it is the answer. But just the things of like, how do you explain yourself in succinctly if you wanted to, when like you are very much of these like two worlds,
Yeah.
and right, like genetically fine, you maybe trace your roots back, but like culturally, if you have no ties to it, then do you want to claim it? Like, is it,
But yeah, like when I meet folks who are like really proud about being Chinese or whatever, I feel a little disconnect, right? Because then they're talking about like, have you been to Hong Kong? Do you really have an experience of that part of yourself? And I would actually be like, if I were to go and find out more about my culture, I think I'd want to visit Burma instead. Because those are all the stories I would hear, and I want to go see that.
yeah.
I mean, before Hong Kong, but yeah.
Yeah. Shout out to Hong Kong.
Or, yeah.
No, totally.
I never thought about that, Frage.
I mean, and that's why I say, like, I know that you're Chinese and I think of you as Chinese, but also, like, I don't think of you in, I guess, sort of box that I have for Chinese people.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm working on that. We're big on, like, the Chinese New Year celebration and all of these, like, very specific things that, like, you also practice, but they don't seem as fundamental to, like, your family cultural practices as they are to ours in some ways. And I think there are other things that you do that we don't do. And I think from what I can tell, it stems from the Burmese side more so.
I think you're right. Yeah. Although, so I was just at my cousin's wedding, and my mom made her the cheongsam. So she's always like very proud that she's like the one that makes all the outfits for anyone who may want to have that part of their culture represented in a wedding. But see, that says something, right? Because then you're like at a wedding, like she has not made the traditional Burmese garb for a bride at any of the other family events. Although the sisters get together and then they will wear it and do their little dances, performance wise. But yeah, it's definitely more of like a showy thing, I feel like, because like that outfit is so iconic, or that dress, right?
Yes. Yes.
What side do I want to rep?
I mean, you don't have to choose sides, right? Like, that's the point. You don't have to choose sides, but something to think about. To bring it back to this dish and to your mom's cooking, you said that you like helped out making it when you were a kid. Have you tried to make this as an adult?
I want to now. Maybe I'll make it when I go home, or I'll hunt down the noodle sheets here, or I make the noodle sheets because it's just whatever, cornstarch and water. No, it's not. It's like potato. I don't even know what it's rice flour, obviously.
That sounds like the hardest part.
Well, they make it seem so easy when you're at the rice roll station, and it just put it in like a cooking sheet and you flatten it out, and then you just kind of heat it for a bit and then you scrape it off. But then it becomes like not the right size.
When you buy these noodle sheets, are they like, they're not dry, right?
No, they're straight up cooked.
Okay.
Oiled in between. They're like 10 by 10. They're in the styrofoam thing. I guess it's kind of like chung fun. It's just not rolled up. It's just like flat.
10 by 10, like inches, like squares?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Like, like squares. So there's like a block.
I don't think I've ever seen them sold.
That's what I mean. Like, how do I find it?
I was just going to say, do we need to go like scour the Chinese markets for this?
If you find it, I'll give you the whole recipe for the filling, and then you can try it.
That sounds awesome. Because I've only seen like the noodles like already sliced up into noodle form, or like the slightly fatter noodles, but not like full squares.
Yeah, the biggest hunt to make this dish is like you just have to hunt down the sheets.
Interesting. Have you ever made any of her other Burmese dishes?
I have made some pickled cauliflower and some pan-fried dry rubbed like curry and cumin chicken. And then that other noodle dish that I was going to maybe talk about, it was like rice noodle, chicken broth, shredded chicken, a bunch of, sorry, is it Roman tomatoes, the oblong ones?
Oh, yeah.
And like half a head of cabbage. It's like hell of cabbage. And that's just in a big pot. I've made here a couple times. I make it to like host because, again, it's like just a big pot. And then you top it off with a fermented tofu sauce. It's like a spicy sauce.
Yeah.
I think that one is more like a mixture of Chinese Burmese.
Do you find now that, I mean, you've been living away from your parents for many years.
Yeah.
Do you find yourself wanting more of her cooking or more Burmese food in general? Or have you just sort of like grown accustomed to not having it?
Oh, I definitely want it a lot more. I guess in my mind, I was always like, if I want Burmese food, I have to go home to get it. Because again, like there was not really many restaurants. There's still not that many here.
Mm-hmm.
And the phone calls home when I want to make something is probably because like the craving is like so strong that I'm like, okay, this requires a phone call to mom that's going to completely not, it's like I have to interpret all the like non-recipe measurements into some form of a cookable dish. It's not the typical stuff. It's not like the coconut kaosui.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the mohinga. I would never attempt to make that. It sounds like how you make pho. You have to like do the broth for like hell of long.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's like mohinga is very involved. So those are things I just reserve to go home. And maybe sometimes I like it that way because then she gets to like do the mom flex and be like, I'll make you the Burmese food here and I make it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Did she ever make anything that we might find on one of our many local Burmese restaurants?
Yeah. I mean, she makes all the stuff and she likes to brag that she makes it the best. Maybe, okay, the other reason my mom is very proud about being a cook is because I lived with my grandma. And my grandma, as like the matriarch of my mom's side of the family, was always like, I hold the crown of cooking. And so she lived with my family. So my mom is the oldest sister, second oldest in general, in all of 8 siblings. And because my mom lived with my grandma, she got a lot of my grandma's like nagging about cooking. It'd be like, you're doing it this, like you're doing it wrong. You're chopping it this way. So they had their own dynamic with cooking. And, you know, my grandma liked to very much dominate the kitchen. So I think that's why my mom is very proud of it. Cause she's like, well, I lived with grandma the longest. So like I learned all the real secrets and I like learned all their recipes are just in their brain. Mm-hmm. So it's like insane encyclopedia of how to make stuff. And maybe that's why she can't like, it's all like the whole feeling, a little bit of this, a little bit of that.
Yeah. Well, and I think also too, there's a certain amount of like, it's the like kitchen equivalent of if I teach someone how to do my job, I'll be out of a job.
Yeah.
Right? Like if I teach you how to make these things, then you don't need me to make them for you anymore.
This is true. You think she secretly holds out on like some secret thing every time she tells me? Maybe not.
I mean, no. Because also I think she'd be super proud if you like called her and you're like, I made it. I've mastered beef curry.
Oh, that's actually a very good question, Frisia. Have you had any of the guests on the show been like, I cooked my mom's dish or my parents' dish for my parents and then let them like rip me to shreds?
No.
Could you imagine?
Oh man, that is a good question.
That is a good question. Let's see. No one has done it yet. We might start asking that in the future.
Or it can be like challenge accepted or not accepted. And then there could be a
totally
follow-up podcast.
That's a funny question. And like, I'm definitely curious. But I think what we're noticing too is that a lot of these dishes, like people just aren't making themselves or for their kids. And part of it is like, there is so much nostalgia attached to it that if you don't get it right, it's not the same.
Yeah.
And that feels, you know, defeatist or there's some shame around it or just disappointing.
No, for sure.
It's kind of the thing of like, if I don't try, I can't mess it up.
Yeah, like keep it the way I remember it.
Yeah, keep it intact in my memory and not like add in this new thing.
Yeah, maybe we need to switch that and be like, I really want to get good at it. I have this maybe extra pressure. Like if I am going to learn it as an only child, I'm like, she ain't passing this on to anyone else. So like, it's
You
like
have to get it right.
I have to get it right. That's why I actually mentioned the test. I was like, maybe the only way I know I'll get it right is I make it back for her. And then she'll be like, oh, not bad.
Because that's the highest praise possible.
Exactly. It's okay. You need to do this a couple more times.
You bring up a really interesting point about being an only child and like the recipes legacy kind of living or dying with you.
Yeah.
Is that something that you've kind of started to want to pick up the mantle of?
I do. And I think I'm slowly learning some of the dishes. I'm trying to like get good at them before I start another one. I can say I probably have cooked everything that I've asked my mom recipes for like less than 5 times each. Maybe I'd cook them twice. There's that many dishes. There is like a ton of different stuff that we would eat. There was never like a lot of repetition. And then like even so, I mentioned my mom is one of 8. So there's like 5 or 6 sisters. And even amongst the sisters, they all make the same dish, right? Like, because they learn from the grandma.
Mm-hmm.
They make the same dish and they still will like pick at each other's version of that dish. So then there is like that conversation,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like amongst the way the sibling interprets the thing. So I feel like, as direct descendant in the household of grandma, like I have to still make it the best. If I did, like sometimes she'll be like, oh, Auntie so-and-so makes this dish the best. Like they definitely know like which ones.
Oh, interesting.
So like with the Burmese ones, I think because some are really complex, my mom likes to brag like she's the best at making the mohinga broth because that's the like really difficult one to do. But yeah, there's certain dishes that certain people have got their awards and their roses for,
Mm-hmm.
and definitely some that are known for not doing things the way right or like doing their own interpretation.
Does this happen at the cousins level too?
Yes, I am an only child, but I do have like 20 cousins, and we are all food lovers for the most part. Yeah, I think some have tried to like pick up the dishes. I do not think a lot of them attempt Burmese food.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I think the more like feasible ones are just like is the earlier dishes is a lot of Chinese food. One auntie is a really good baker. So she's kind of like, hey, sweets is my area. Like she got to like block it off. She's like, y'all, I got desserts. You know what I mean? And then what's funny is her daughter really likes baking and doing like cakes and cookies and stuff like that. So I think that's really funny.
It sounds like there's a potential for like a Scott Pilgrim-esque competition where you like seek out the auntie who makes the specific dish and you learned and master it, and then you have to be in a competition with her cousins to be the top cousin.
Oh, man.
Whoever can cook all of them
that's
the best.
some generational stuff right there. Like, love it.
What just came up for me is you mentioned earlier that you're a maker. And so there's certain dishes that you like dumplings and the rolling and things. And your mom is also a maker, like seamstress, has, been sewing things for as long as I've known you, certainly before that. And I wonder if like that also translates to the type of cooking that you would like to do. I think for her, she probably has to cook everything. But for you, like maybe there are certain things that you like cooking more or will cook more because they lean more towards the maker mentality.
Yeah. My closest attempt to that recently has been the pasta making.
Oh, yeah.
And that is because it's makery, but it was also like graphic because I started making like colors and patterns and stuff in the noodles. And that was exciting because then that was merging like design world. And then I was like, oh my God, too much. Like I had to reel it back because it's like, and then I'm not even concerned about the taste as much as like the way it looks. And I'm like, oh, no. We have to focus on like, texture of the noodle, get the dough right. And I was like, at first I was like, F all that. I just need to make these noodles look great. Or like these little bow tie tortellinis, like they need to look amazing. I was like, but you don't have to eat it. Yeah, but I love the wonton wrapping. I love rolling the Vietnamese like summer rolls. I love that.
So what are you gonna start making next? I mean, if you're a maker, right? Like how do you translate being a maker to the kitchen for you besides super designy pasta?
I don't even really care about plating so much at the end, which I thought like I would. I think it's just like the act of cooking and making, prepping and doing all that is when I'm into it, I'll get like really into it. And then it's probably as cathartic as like and creative feeling as like doing design work or making a painting or something. I feel like there's like a similarity there. There's a through line for sure. Like I will try to make new stuff like and find ways to not get bored with cooking. Only recently have I started to be a little more like switching recipes or like altering them. And then that's the worst part, right? It turns out good. And I was like, I didn't write anything down. And then I turned into my mom and I'm like, how did I do that? I was like, it's a little bit of this and a little bit of this. And I don't remember exactly what was done. And then I have to like do it all over again.
What if that was how you learned to cook Burmese food? Instead of like, I gotta make it till she gives me the it's okay approval.
Yeah, right. Just do it in the comfort of my own home and taste buds.
Yeah.
I could try that.
I mean, I think because what just came up for me is like in talking about all the aunties and how they all make the same thing, but it tastes a little different. And they're still all Chinese Burmese. Like it's authentic. It just tastes a little different because like they have their own preferences and their own palates.
Yeah.
I guess what I also thought of was like, I think particularly for like people of our generation and younger, there's a focus on authenticity and like kind of getting foods like from the source and what is authentic and like, are we cooking it the right way and things like that. But for you, like you are Burmese Chinese. If you're cooking the thing and it doesn't taste like your mom's, it doesn't make it any less authentic necessarily, right? It just is like for your palate.
That's true. And I do know my palate does lean not totally Chinese.
Yeah.
Like now I definitely know when I'm like, I like things a little more on the spicy sour side.
Mm-hmm.
And that definitely comes from having a love for all of those flavors early on.
Yeah. You know, to go back to this thing about our generation and authenticity, I think there's something with being American born, maybe a few generations removed that you're like, oh, well, I have to do it their way, the mainland way, the homeland way. Yeah. Otherwise, it's not authentic because like I'm this Americanized, whatever.
Yeah.
And I guess in this moment, I'm like, oh, maybe we should start challenging that belief.
Yeah, I'm seeing a little of that challenge. You know how there's just like so many new like restaurant entrepreneurs now, like, and there's like a common thing in a lot of their backstories. Like, oh, I opened up this restaurant because I want to take these dishes I learned from my grandma, my mom, and I'm putting this other spin on it. Mm-hmm. And it's like always like paying homage to the traditional dishes and then, you know, creating that other like pizzazz.
Yeah, right. It's like a more modernized style.
Yeah, there's an embracing of that for sure in that world.
Yeah. So why can't we do that at home too?
We got to do that at home. I'm going to do that at home. Yeah, okay. So we rewrite these recipes with our modifications that we feel elevated, whatever dish.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then there are ours, and then you get to share it out however you want to share it out.
And if you like it exactly the traditional way, then that's how you like it. And you can get it on point that way.
Well, and even in the like liking and making it the traditional way, we have modern equipment for different things, right? Like we don't necessarily, you know, like there was a point where like, yeah, someone was making the rice roll, the like sheet and the rice noodle. And then someone else at one point was like, actually, we're just going to start selling this and you can buy it.
Right.
I think what's interesting about that to me when I think about your mom actually cooking these things that I have ordered from a restaurant and paid a lot of money for over the course of many years.
Right.
Obviously, someone is making them for me in a professional kitchen. Great. But it still sort of boggles my mind that like your mom can make them and that a person could learn.
Right. Like myself.
Yes, like yourself or eventually maybe even me.
Yes.
But it just seems like those are some of the things where I'm like, oh no, of course you have to get this at a restaurant because who could even learn to make this at home?
Right. That is something I think when you had asked earlier, I was like, I definitely don't know why in my mind the Burmese food is just more challenging, right? And maybe because it's rare, it's like rare ingredients or more difficult to find stuff. And and I'm complaining about rice noodle sheets. Like, could you imagine?
I think it's the combination of the harder to find ingredients and also just the presentation and the way things are put together is like a little bit different in a way that for me, I can't just be like, oh, I figured this out, or like this is like this other thing. And so if I just switch out a couple of flavor, like it doesn't seem to have a one-to-one match in something that is accessible. Yeah, because I'm like, oh, your mom, she makes cow soy. Like you could just do that. Like you could just do that.
Frisia, like that one is one of the easy ones.
Well,
It's
that's
like
what I'm saying. Like that's what I mean, right? Like I think
like,
if I really think about it, I'm like, that's probably not that hard.
totally.
And if she taught me, I would learn close enough. Or if I even looked on the internet for a recipe, I would learn close enough. But in my mind, it's so far from what I know from my own experiences in the kitchen. I'm just like, no, I can't. Like, who could? How could I ever?
Yeah. Yeah, like actually my last trip home, I made it a point to actually learn the garnishes and the things that she always had on the counter. So for example, she always has this like very golden, crispy garlic oil. It's almost like a little toasted slash burnt, and it's just chopped garlic. It's like deep fried, and then she keeps a jar of this oil, and that's what she uses to just flavor like a lot of the specifically Burmese food as just like a top off.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing is frying shallots, almost in a caramelized but like dried way. And like it's like a little chewy, not saucy, like it's chewy and dried.
Mm-hmm.
And that's also another like little topping that is like put on dishes that just gives it that like touch
Yes.
that might be missing.
Yes.
Right. So then I was like, I got to learn those things. And those have to be my like staple in my pantry or on my cooking thing. Right. Another thing is like they sprinkled dried shrimp powder on everything. So you get, first of all, it's actually pretty expensive to buy those little like dried shrimps just to like flavor stuff.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
But then you got to go put it in a like coffee grinder, grind up like a jar of it, and then have that chill in there. And then if you do that with just fish sauce and like lime and put that on any kind of egg noodle, it's like voila. It's like all the essential things. I had like a light bulb moment. I was like, I got to learn like those things.
Yeah.
So then like you make it easier to like approach any Burmese dish. You just have to have the stuff. And then you're like, oh, I don't have the dried shrimps. I'm not going to make it. Or I don't have this like tamarind block that's already been dissolved for 2 hours that adds that like tart flavor that this noodle dish needs.
And there's no substitute.
There's no sub, yeah. The other thing that I love that has tamarind is sinigang, but they always use the powder seasoning in the packet. And then that is not a sub for tamarind in Burmese cooking. I know this is a bit of a tangent because now we're talking about this other stuff in Burmese cooking.
No, I love that because it's such a good point about, you know, when we think about our generation trying to learn things from our parents and learn these dishes, a lot of it seems so daunting because when you think like, okay, I have to make all of these components because they're not ones that I just have on hand already, right? When you mentioned the shallots, I think about like when we order Burmese food and it's delivered and there's like a little container that has the shallots in it and it super like makes a difference. And it is like, it really like finishes the dish.
Yeah, dude.
Among other things, like a squeeze of lemon and whatever.
Totally.
And those are the things where if you like think about having to make all of the components from scratch the first time for every dish, it feels overwhelming.
Right.
But what you just named is like, oh, there's a bunch of things that you just like make and have them all of the time, like a restaurant does, which is why like I think restaurants can make it already, right? Like, then like, oh yeah, that does make it a lot simpler.
For sure. I don't know if you're one of those people where like not having a certain sauce or not having a certain little like sprig of whatever just makes that whole dish for you. And sometimes like, for example, if I get takeout and they forget to put this like certain sauce that I feel makes the whole dish that like brings everything together. And it sounds really petty, but then I don't get it. And I'm like, oh man, I don't even want to eat this anymore.
No, I get that.
Sometimes it'd be like that, right? So like about the shallots, I was at one point, I was like, oh, it's just fried shallots. Like, how hard could it be? And my mom was like, oh, no. You need like a while to prep it. You need to chop all this stuff up. But then after it takes a while to caramelize and everything, you lay them out all flat on a sheet on like a drying rack. And it needs counter space. It needs like time. It needs a lot of this stuff. And it's like, it starts hitting you like, wow, like there is so much love in food prep, right? Like all of that time, like who would really like do that much prep to make you one meal? Like who in our lives now, right? Like besides these like mother figures who want to just show this like big expression. And it's really sad that like you don't have that appreciation moment when you're younger, right? Until like I'm attempting to do it. I'm like, oh wow, that took 3 days just for this one topping, right? Like, damn, yeah.
You bring up something about like showing love and appreciation through food. Do you feel like that was a part of your growing up, like your mom showing her care through cooking?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Maybe that's what the podcast should be called, like cooking is a love language. Yeah, 500% probably. And I think some of the work we're doing now is trying to be like understanding that maybe I should let go of something I was holding on to that she wasn't able to tell me, like verbally, because I understand now that, she didn't have that tool set to tell me what I needed to hear, or not even knowing. And she did what she knew how to do really well, right? Which is just make me something super delicious that took 3 days. Sometimes it has been some closure for me, I think. I think there's some kind of like switch that went off that I had to be like, oh, these grand gestures of cooking need to make me forgive them for not giving me what I needed to hear, like audibly.
Yeah.
And I don't know how that really makes sense, but I think it's just more about a different power of letting go, like from inside maybe, and having that just be enough, right? And understanding that that should be enough. They're getting older, and like I'm still holding on to stuff, don't get me wrong, but at some point there's just switching the way I think about it, I suppose.
Yeah. I think what I hear is like coming to an understanding, and I don't think that you're alone in this. I think for a lot of us, there was a lot of understanding that they were doing the best that parents could do. And what that meant for a lot of that generation was cooking and food. And that was their way to show care. It was what they knew, and also what was available to them.
Right.
Like it was available to them to do that as an act of service.
Yeah, because there's no other example for any of the other love languages, right? There's definitely no example for words of affirmation.
I was gonna say.
Like zero.
Yes.
Example for that is like belt whipping or something like that.
Or like it's pretty good.
Yeah, it's not bad.
Yeah, it's not bad.
Like
it's okay.
It's okay. Yeah, exactly. Like wow. The other thing that I think about, and we mentioned this earlier, is that my mom is a maker, and she is also a maker of clothes. And I do think that it was very apparent to her early on that I very much cared about self-expression. Like that's always been like a very big, I don't know, thing for me, like a uniqueness or something, right? And she was able to like every time there was a prom or something, she would take the care and time to like sit with me and be like, hey, and like it'd be like a mom and daughter thing, like what are we making for this, this dance? And we'd have an outing and like pick out like really like specific details, which is probably why I'm like how I am now. Or she was just enabling that part of me. Yeah, and she would really like lean into that, and she, again, like what she knew how to do, right, to show that she was spending time and effort on something like for me. Oh my God, is that why I have a life based on making stuff for people?
Is it? Maybe.
I make stuff for people for money. I do make stuff for people I care about for no money.
Yes, you do.
No. I do express my own caring that way. And I'm hoping now that I can also add in the verbal communication part along with it, right? To really drive it home.
Do you think your mom would want to receive in the same way? Like, do you think it would mean a lot to her if you cooked for her?
Oh man, I've thought about that. I've never thought that it would resonate with her. I think as Asians, though, we're just bad at like receiving anything. Like even when, well, actually, you have challenged me, Frisia, because I think because I'm not home very often, and when I am home, sometimes in order to be efficient and maximize our time, and to not have my mom cook, I will often suggest like let's just order dinner, so you can take a break, and like I don't mind like you don't need to make me the dish and blah blah blah, and she'll often refuse. But I've never actually been like, hey, I'm going to go to the grocery store and like you just chill while I cook everything. I have not done that. That could be cool. I think I did it once when I got out of college, but I think it was more to be like, hey, look, I can take care of myself, and I made her like Korean food or something. I think I made her something not Chinese. Yeah. So that was, and she said she liked it, but who knows?
Yeah, I guess it made me wonder, like, do people like to receive love the way they give it?
Yeah, that's always an interesting question.
And particularly for a generation for whom, like, some love languages just were never a possibility.
I could try it. It could be an interesting thing to do. You know what's funny now, though? I feel like I'm being a little more patient with her and giving her verbal affirmation because there's a lot of like, I think, lack of self-confidence sometimes, just noticing as I'm older. And I kind of feel like these like small things are really, I think she's receiving that very well, which was surprising to me. So I don't know if cooking will give her something like confidence like that.
There's like the words of affirmation that build her confidence, but then would she receive that as like how you love her, the way that she showed you love through cooking? If she would kind of instinctually like know that that's what you're saying without saying it.
What do you think? Actually, my mom.
I don't know. I mean, knowing your mom, I think she would like refuse for a long time first, and it would be really hard for you to actually do it. But I think that if you did it, she would really like it and appreciate it. And I think she would feel really good about the way that you have turned out as a kid, her child, and like feel good about herself as a parent.
I may have missed a really great opportunity that last time I was home. She had an ear surgery, and I came home for 2 weeks to help around the house and take care of her. And then this woman had already prepped hella food for herself before I got home. So I didn't even really have like that much of an opportunity to be like, like, hey, well, obviously she was doing a lot of resting, but the thing is like she had already been like, oh, and then so-and-so sister's bringing this on this day. She made it a very big point to have all the food already done. Should I have felt disrespected? I'm just kidding.
No. But I mean, I think like you kind of like drive home the point, right? Like it's such an important part of what she does during the day and who she is.
Yeah.
That I wonder how she would receive it from you.
That's interesting.
Whether or not you're cooking her food, Burmese food, whatever, I would be really curious to see how she just receives you like cooking for her in general and saying like, I'm going to take care of you.
Yeah.
For dinner in this way.
I'm going to do it next time I come home. Maybe just a warm up is like if we're having a family potluck, then I can make like a dish on her behalf so she does not have to stress about it or something.
Crystal, this has been super fun. Thank you so much for being here. I knew a lot of this about you, but I think I learned some more, which is nice after, we'll say, decades of friendship. We won't say how many.
Oh, God. I know.
We're very old people at this point.
You can't say that.
Look, I'm just going to lean into it. Anyway, Crystal, this has been so great. Thank you. We are going to have to figure out how to find these big flat rice noodles so that we can make them for ourselves and for our kids. Is there somewhere that people can find you and your work on the internet if they'd like to?
Yeah. I'd like to say thank you for having me. It was great. I run a little design studio in Brooklyn, and you can find me at mechanic seamstress, one word.com. And that is because my mom is a seamstress and my dad was a mechanic. And I am them.
Yeah. Listeners at home, if you would like to try making Big Fat Rice Noodle Roll, we will get a recipe up on our website, worstqualitycrab.com, or you can find us on Instagram at worstqualitycrab. Until next time, we will talk to you soon. Thanks so much. Bye.